First Things, episode number 63.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. So good to have you back with me today as we are continuing our study on essentialism. And today we're back on a topic we've talked a lot about in the past. And so today may be a bit shorter. I'm not sure if we need to say as much. And some of the things may probably be a repeat of things I've said before. But I think it's a good thing to remind ourselves, and that is saying no to things and how we do this and what are some tips for that type of thing. Few updates before we get started. We still have the survey going on, and I'll probably let it go for another week or two. And we have gotten up to 26 responses. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that and am grateful for all the people that have done that survey. And if you want to do this survey, you go to firstthingsproductivity.com/survey. And things, again, is plural. And I would greatly appreciate if you would consider doing that, especially if you're a fan of the show. Only about 10 questions, probably take you 5 or 10 minutes, and it can be completely anonymous as well. I had some great discussions this week. Many of you are taking advantage of my email. So I've had a great conversation with Jackie and also with Jen, as well as Amanda. And I think I owe pretty much all of you an email still. So you may actually hear this before you get my email, maybe not. And I will be replying to you pretty soon. So again, thank you for all the great conversations I've had. You know, actually, this makes everything that much better for me. I really needed, I think, that connection point with you guys in some sense. I really want to know what's going on in your lives and the things you're struggling with and the things that resonate with you and things you want to hear about. And I just love talking to you guys. So thank you again for emailing me. And you can reach me at at brandonvaughn.com. And Vaughn is V as in Victor, AUGHN. Feel free to send me anything except for spam. Anything but spam is okay. But if you have questions, comments, feel free. We'd love to talk to you guys. And you can also reach me on Twitter or Facebook, things like that. But this is a direct way that I can see on a regular basis. I don't always see Facebook, and Facebook kind of hides things from me. So I don't always like it a lot. I don't like it very much. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. So before we get started, as always, what's my Essentialism report card looking like? My writing for the week, I think last time it was at an A-. If I'm honest, it might be a B+ this week. I've had a lot of stuff just crowd into some of my mornings. I've had about 2 or 3 mornings where I really haven't been able to write. And because of that, it's snuck later into the afternoon, maybe where I wasn't as focused. I know twice, I think it caught me at night, and I was like, I don't want to go to bed without having written something. And so I would write something, and I would be so tired, maybe I would only write 5 minutes instead of my 30-minute. I haven't had a chance to even write today. But I am writing every day, so I'm still sticking with it and making progress. But wow, it's just a little tough. You know, life kind of gets in the way. But, you know, the things I've learned is, okay, I get knocked down, I get back up. And that's the point. Consistency. I actually heard this webinar this week. These authors were talking about consistency and how that is so important. You know, it would be so much better to consistently write every day if you can only write 10 minutes than just to take a whole day where you're writing 5,000 words and then you don't write anything again for 26 days or something like that. Pretty much like going to the gym or working out. Much better if you work out every day of the week, even if it's only 10 minutes, than to work out one day every 3 months. You know, this is the whole thing. It's consistency. And I think this is what I picked up from Neil Fiore from the Now Habit, because this is how he mentions how he writes his books. So he'll set aside time every day, and before long, he's written it. And I've noticed this with myself as well. Music, I started off the last weekend tremendously. I actually started recording some of my vocals to one of my songs and recorded it and did some guitar work. And you know, I deal with a lot of perfectionism when it comes to my singing sometimes, because even, you know, just my speaking voice is the same way. I hear in my head the way I want to sound. So I want to sound like, I don't know, I have a lot of favorite singers that I would love to sound like, and I don't sound like them when I listen back to it. And suddenly I get very insecure about my voice and about my singing. And some of the songs I actually have up that you can download. You can actually, I could send you a link to it if you ever wanted to listen to it, but there's one song in particular. It's kind of a rockier song, and I don't know if I really have a rock style voice when I sing. And I remember spending about 3 or 4 months constantly tweaking and re-recording things and adding a lot of reverb to kind of drown out things here and there. I was just obsessed with it. So, one of the things I want to try to get better about is, hey, there's only one me, and maybe I'm not the greatest vocalist on this planet. Okay. There's nothing I can do about that. I mean, I could practice, but I could spend the next 5-10 years to become one of the world's best vocalists. And guess what? I'm not going to be doing any music. I'm going to be doing nothing but practicing for the next 5 or 10 years. I'm who I am. And the quicker I can become comfortable in my own skin, in my own body, in my own voice. So anyway, I find myself dealing with that a little bit last week because I was doing that. And then the week hit, and oh my gosh, where'd the week go? I've not really been doing music at all. And it's been kind of frustrating. So I started out on the weekend like at an A plus on my music, and then probably got all the way down to pure F. So I don't know where that leaves me at that. Sleep. Gosh, I've just had a rough week. I'm just dealing with my essentialisms and bearing them all to the world. But I've gotten, for some reason, 6 hours of sleep most of the night. Last night, I was going to record this podcast, and I thought to myself, I know my day would go so much easier tomorrow if I could go ahead and record this podcast. As it is, I'll be recording it the next day. It'll probably be Saturday before I release it, and I always like to release it on Thursday or Friday, but I need to get some sleep. I just haven't been sleeping very well, and I did. Last night I got over 8 hours of sleep, and it was great. So I made up a little bit, eating and exercise. Okay. Been doing decent with my eating. I finally got back on a multivitamin, read some stuff about vitamins usage in our lives and how important it is, and how there's a lot of misconceptions out there about that. So I've been introducing that back in my life. I need to get a little bit better on the exercise. I was starting doing good. I don't know what it is. Hit about Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm sure, it's hump day. That's the big thing, and then a lot of changes though for me, work management, teams, all these types of things. And that kind of adds to it as well. All right. So anyway, it's been kind of an okay week, not terrible, not great. Again, it's a learning thing. I'm not sitting here beating up on myself and saying, oh, Brandon, you're such a worthless person. Why can't you get anything right? No, that's some stinking thinking right there. Okay, where can I adjust? Okay, in my writing, in my music, what can I do different this next week? Okay, this week kind of sucked. Now, what am I going to do about it next week? How am I going to get back on track? How am I going to get ramped up again on this type of stuff? And that's how I approach it, and try not to let a couple of weeks go by where I don't think about how to self-correct and try some new things and experiment with some new things in this whole realm. All right, so let's talk about no. How do you say no to things? Because this is a very important part of essentialism. If you think about this, we've got to be able to say no to things. The right no spoken at the right time can change the course of history. Greg opens up his chapter 11, called Dare, the Power of a Graceful No, by telling the story of Rosa Parks and how that famous no changed everything in our world. One simple no can change the world. And it definitely is what we need in our lives in order to be able to embrace essentialism. We have to have that dignity to be able to say no to things. And quite frankly, the reason why we don't say no many times is because we don't believe we're allowed to say no. Again, we have this misconception that we must say yes to everything. We must say yes to every trivial thing in our lives, and it makes us a bad person if we just say no to things in our lives. But if we've been really pushing over these last weeks, we've got to consider what are the essential few things in our lives that we're going to say yes to. And that means that we're going to have to say no to the trivial things. And the harder thing is that we're going to have to say no to some really good things. That some good things come along and it's not really the best things. And therefore the answer is no. I'm sorry. I would have loved really to get up with you this weekend and watch the football game all afternoon. But, and it would have been fun. And it would have been fun to hang out. But, it's going to take me away from something else that I consider to be more essential. Now, I wouldn't say that to that person, but that's kind of what's going on in my head. And not just say yes to every single thing. We've talked about this before, but we've got a lot of psychological hangups sometimes when it comes to saying no. We are afraid to say no to things and to people because we're afraid that they won't accept us. And a lot of our worth sometimes, sadly, is tied together by people accepting us and people saying that we're okay. And we need that in our lives. And if we don't have that in our lives, it really bothers us. Yet what happens when we do this is our lives become like a servant role. We become the other person's servant. And I do believe in serving other people, but I believe we serve by choice, not by default, and not just have people run our lives. Some of us think it's selfish to say no. Well, I can't say no. What would people think of me? It would seem awfully selfish of me to just say no to things. Well, guess what? I mean, this is something I've got to remind myself of. You only live once. This is it. I mean, this earthly life and whatever you may believe, spiritually or religiously, okay. But in terms of this life, this is it. And if you sit and squander 20, 30, 40 years of your life doing trivial things that don't really resonate with you, we don't have anyone to blame but ourselves. So it's okay to be a little selfish and say no to things. I know what's going on in some of your minds. It goes on in my mind is I sit there and say, well, if I start saying no to things, I'm just going to become all prideful and self-focused and self-centered, and I'll be this rude person to people and people won't like me. Guess what? That's not going to happen. And that is that inner critic voice that many of us have that is fearful and pushes us away from a balanced life. We're so fearful of that we never really contemplate the fact that it will never happen. It will never show up like this. And if you say no, it's not going to make you appear to be selfish. You're not going to become the most self-centered person who only thinks about themselves. In fact, it may actually work the opposite way. The fact that you have dignity to realize that there are certain things that you need to have in your life means that you are now possibly more free to be other things for people. I think that it might work in the opposite direction of what we're fearful of. But honestly, I've never really met anyone who embraced essentialism in their life who became the most obnoxious person on this planet. Now, I have seen sometimes where people become a little bit more, or a little less, I would say, accessible. And that's always troubling sometimes. I remember some people, even on the internet, that I was talking to maybe 2-3 years ago, and now they've gotten so big, it's hard to ever talk to them. And it's like, they don't have time for me anymore type of thing. And well, how do you get over that? Well, I realize they're not essential. They're not part of my essentialism. And why did I need them for my purpose and worth and significance in the first place? It was cool. It was a journey, and that journey started and that journey ended. That chapter closed and a new chapter started in my life. And, I've got to remember that it isn't one long chapter for the entire book called My Life. No, chapters end and chapters begin. Journeys end and journeys begin. And I go to life with a loose grip on it. Not this tight grip that it must stay this way all the time, and therefore, no, it's a very loose grip on life. It's a grip. I'm not just being spacey here and saying, oh, it just all matters, just be free type of thing. No, I have a grip on life. There are certain things that I want and certain things I'm aiming for and that I hope for. I have a grip, but it's a loose grip because I know that life's going to fluctuate and it's going to flex a little bit here and a little bit there, and it's going to change directions. And sometimes I may be heading north and sometimes I may be heading northeast, but I'm still heading north, and it's okay. It's quite okay. And saying no is this type of thing. And I'll be honest with you, it's probably been one of my hardest things for me personally. I tend to be a yes person for everything. Still to this day, have to really watch myself on this because I'll have a tendency just to kind of go along with everything, but doing better about this, but still it's tied into my self-worth way too much, way much more than I would actually like it to be, granted, but I'm dealing with it. One of the biggest things I've had to learn in saying no to things is to, first of all, know why I'm saying no. And it's not just saying no just by default. I mean, that's that fear in me. Oh, I'm just going to say no by default. The essence is what's essential? What's your true north? What's your compass? What's your mission statement? Is what we talked about in the previous episode. What is that? What are you wanting to say yes to? See, the real issue here to me is not saying no. Oh, I'm just going to be a no person. No, the essence is what are you going to say yes to? And the fact you're going to say yes to certain things means by default that you're going to have to say no to some things. The no is a consequence of the yes part in your life. You say yes to certain things, you're going to have to say no to certain things. So it's not so much about, I must say no, I'm a no person. And that's not it. You're a yes person. But you're not going to be saying yes to everything, yes to all the trivial things that don't really matter in life that is going to leave you scratching your head. What did I do with my life? No, you're going to look back and say, wow, what a ride that was. You might remember that quote. I think it's from Hunter Thompson. Somebody wrote this, that life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. You guys might remember that quote. Now, I love that quote on many fronts. I think, the totally worn out part, if you're totally worn out because of your passions, then great. But totally worn out because you're burned out is a different type of worn out that I don't think that he's talking about here. But this is the essence. We're yes men, yes women. What are we going to say yes to? What are our passions? What are our mission statements? What do we want to be about in life? That's what we're going to say yes to. Not yes to everything, yes to those vital few things, those essential things. Now, we're not going to be no people either, but that doesn't mean we're going to say no to everything, because we already said we're saying yes to our essential things. But because we're going to say yes to those, we've got to say no to all the non-essential things. So it's a balance. And maybe it's more weighted on the no side, because quite frankly, I don't know about you, but for me, there's a lot of things that are not essential for me in life. And therefore, there's a lot of things I probably will say no to. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is not to say no to say no. The purpose is to say no in order to say yes. Or maybe better the other way, is to say yes, and thus you have to say no. Maybe a much better way of actually saying that. Another thing that's really important to remember is to quit apologizing for saying no. Most of us make excuses. We say, oh, I'm sorry, but I can't. We like to constantly apologize as if we don't have the right to say no about things in our lives. Oh, I'm sorry. I do this a lot, and I usually kick myself for it. When I think back later, I'm like, why did you apologize? There's no reason to apologize just because you've had a more essential thing in your life. There's no apology needed for this thing. Your bank account gets drained because the bank makes a mistake, and you have to contact them and tell them about it. I mean, do you call them and say, I'm so sorry for bothering you about this, but you drained my bank account? No. What on earth is going on? You guys need to fix this. This is not, we're not going to be apologizing for something like that. We shouldn't apologize for things. Now, doesn't mean you have to be rude to people, but we can still be firm about where we're going in life, and we don't have to justify that. We don't have to get people's permission in order to say no. Would it be okay if I didn't do this? Would you be annoyed if I say no? We've got to quit that kind of weird talking as if we need people to approve us in order to be able to say no to things. Now, as we've said in the past, it's very important as we become these type of yes, parentheses, no people, that we're very clear on what is essential. And we've been emphasizing this every week. If we don't really know what's essential, it's going to be hard to say no to things in the moment. Many times you may have to do like I do and think back on your week and think, wow, I spent all my time doing this and that, and those weren't very important, so I need to be on the lookout for that again, because this will probably come up in the next week. I need to be ready to say no to those things because those were traps. Wow, I wasted a whole hour on that, a whole 2 hours, a whole 30 minutes, and they weren't very essential to me. Be on the lookout for this, Brandon. Now, I'm talking to myself. Be on the lookout for this. Be looking because this comes up, and you have to be ready to say no to this. Sometimes it's nice to have foresight into things. It doesn't always happen for me, but when it does, it's really nice. I can look at things and say, this will probably be something you have to deal with now. So let's get after it, and let's be ready to say no. So here's what Greg says in his book. Non-essentialists say yes because of feelings of social awkwardness and pressure. They say yes automatically, without thinking, often in pursuit of the rush one gets from having pleased someone. But essentialists know that after the rush comes the pang of regret. They know they will soon feel bullied and resentful, both at the other person and at themselves. Eventually, they will wake up to the unpleasant reality that something more important must now be sacrificed to accommodate this new commitment. Of course, the point is not to say no to all requests. The point is to say no to the non-essentials so we can say yes to the things that really matter. It is to say no frequently and gracefully to everything but what is truly vital. So a non-essentialist is going to avoid saying no to avoid feeling socially awkward and pressure. The essentialist is going to dare to say no firmly, resolutely, and gracefully. A non-essentialist says yes to everything, but an essentialist is going to say yes only to the things that really matter the most. Now, if it helps, and Greg mentions this in his book, you don't always have to use the word no. He gives some examples of this. Instead of saying no, I'm not going to do this, you could say, I am flattered that you thought of me, but I'm afraid I don't have the bandwidth. Or I would very much like to, but I'm overcommitted. Now, we have to be careful that we're not offering up excuses sometimes that we're tempting the other person to meet for us. So if we say, I would love to very much, but I'm overcommitted, but you're saying that to your boss, then they often, I've said that before to a boss, and they say, well, let me look at your schedule. I can help you get uncommitted. And I'm thinking, great. This is just what I needed in that case. But we can learn gracefully to say things. We need to definitely focus on trade-offs in our lives. We need to remind ourselves that everyone is selling and pushing something. People have their own agendas in life, and I'm not faulting them. I have my own. I have certain things I want to do in life. I mix it up with people who have their own agenda. They're selling something as well, and I have to remember this as I go through life. We have to make peace with the fact that saying no often requires trading popularity for respect. We must ask ourselves sincerely, would I rather be popular or would I rather be respected? I'm not so sure we want popularity over respect. And we need to remember that a clear no can be more graceful than a vague or non-committal yes. Greg next gives us 8 things that we could try to put into our lives in order to put this no more visibly in our day-to-day interactions. One of these is the awkward pause. Basically, we use pauses and silence to our advantage instead of against us. So if someone comes to you for a request, then just pause for a moment. Just don't answer that email right away. Let it go for a little bit. 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, a day, a couple of days. You kind of have a good feeling for how far you can push certain things. I've noticed this in my own life, even with bosses, that sometimes a request will come and it's not something that really resonates with me. And if it comes to it, okay, there's the moment of choice. I may have to say no to this, or I may say yes out of consequence to other things. But many times, if I will just pause and just not answer it right away, it will usually never surface again, or someone else will do it. Same thing if someone comes to you and is saying things to you that you don't want to hear or you don't want to commit to. You just don't have to say anything. Just be silent for a little bit, and you'll be amazed at how that little trick can many times thwart things that people are getting you to try to say yes to. There is a soft no, and that is by giving alternatives to things. Instead of saying, no, I can't do this, you could say, no, I can't do this right now, but I would be willing to do this tomorrow if you would be willing for that. That is oftentimes a nice technique to have in the back of your pocket. Let me check my calendar and I'll get back with you. There's kind of that element. It's kind of a mixture of the last two things, where you're kind of giving more of a soft no and there's a little bit of silence. Let me get back with you about that. I've done this before too, and now that I think about it, maybe in saying it, it sounds like I'm manipulating the circumstances a little bit. But I've often said to people, let me look into it and I will get back with you, or let's talk about it later. Sometimes I'll say it kind of vague like that, and then I'll go on with things, and maybe I will honestly check it, but I won't necessarily get back with that person right away. And I would figure if this person's really set about doing this, then I'll hear back from them. If I don't hear back from them, then I'll just let it go. And about 50% of the time, maybe more, that person never gets back to me. So I realize it wasn't that big of a request for them in the first place. Greg mentions using email bounce backs, and that is more like an auto response. So if you're really busy at particular times, if you're on vacation, some workplaces require you to do an auto response when you go on vacation, so people know that you are on vacation. But this is a really nice thing to do. If you're working on a project, just set an auto response back message saying, I'm going to be busy for the next few hours. You will not hear from me, or expect a slow response back to your email or something like that. If it's a boss, maybe the way you say no is by pushing them about what you should deprioritize. So Greg says, say yes, but what should I deprioritize in doing this? And this often works very good on bosses, is to say, yes, I'm happy to do this and make this a priority, but this means that some of the other projects are going to have to be put on the back burner. or I'm going to have to deprioritize some of these to pay attention to this new project. So what would you like for me to deprioritize? And if you state it like that, many times either they will deprioritize things for you, so that frees up time to do things, or they'll realize, oh gosh, we can't afford to do any of that, so let me instead give this to someone else. And there's a few other tips in his book. I'll let you read those. They didn't resonate quite as much with me, although I think they're important. I mean, one of those is to say it with humor, and that's useful too. It depends on who it is that I'm talking to. Some people don't like a lot of humor when you tell them no to things, but there's some other little cool tricks in there that you may want to read as well. So that's going to be it for today. I've done a whole episode on saying no that I go into this in a lot more depth, and I would recommend maybe just going back to that particular episode, and that is episode 9, from 1, Just Say No, Freedom from Criticism, Manipulation, and Guilt, if I can say manipulation. And I go through a whole set of techniques in there for how to say no. That is episode number 9. You can go to firstthingsproductivity.com/09 for that. Also talk about it in episode number 43, The Assertive No, in our series over assertiveness, firstthingsproductivity.com/43. I thought we talked about it in the Neil Fiore Now Habits series, but maybe I didn't because I don't see it right now. I do know episode 9 was one of my favorite episodes because we went through a lot of action steps in this. And in fact, I'm reading it from my blog site right now. The 10 action steps to learn to say no is to start small, to say no, to say yes, to be simple and direct, to expect some resistance if people are used to pushing you around, to pick your battles, to quit worrying about hurting someone's feelings, to be persistent, to stay cool and keep your emotions in check, and then emergency tools, which was a really fun thing to record, emergency tools to use in worst case situations. I go through 4 techniques for dealing with conflict and manipulation. And if I remember correctly, I actually wanted to get someone on here that could dialogue situationals with me. And I didn't know anyone, didn't have anyone when I was recording this. So I ended up kind of mimicking, I think I was playing some guy with an Irish accent. Oh, Brandon, you want, to do this and that. Would you do this for me? And it kind of sounds silly, but I was dialoguing with myself. I was pretending I was having a dialogue with a boss or someone who was kind of in a conflicted situation. And I kind of show some emergency techniques to deal with these types of things. But that's a pretty long episode, 40 minutes or so, where I just talk about nothing but saying no. It's where I came up with my saying that your most powerful no is a well-defined yes, which is long before I ever heard of this Essentialism book. Definitely probably something I got from Stephen Covey, because I'm heavily influenced by him as well. So that's going to end our episode for today. You guys get in touch with me if you got questions, if you got comments, if you just want to shoot the breeze and talk about things. Would love to talk to you. If you definitely have any questions or problems or concerns or things going on in your life that you would just like to have someone to talk to, you're not alone. I mean, really, if you listen to this show, you're not alone in life. And if you ever feel that way, I'm sorry. The fact is you're not, because you always have me. If you ever want to dialogue with me, talk to me, you can email me at brandonvaughn.com, V as in Victor, AUGHN. And, there's a lot of productivity shows out there that are great, but good luck ever trying to talk to the person that you're listening to. And I don't mean that bad, but, people are out there making money and they're making, a living off of this. I just got an email from someone who does this, and I have a lot of respect for this person. I'm not going to mention their name, but they're doing this big mastermind, and I was reading through it, and they're only taking about 10 or 15 people, and in order to be a part of this mastermind, you have to earn more than $250,000 a year, and it's going to cost a lot of money, but this person's not going to tell you how much money this mastermind is going to cost you until you qualify. And once you qualify, be ready for a hefty price on the other end, basically. And I'm sitting there thinking, there's a lot of people that could benefit from this person contact, and they're not ever going to get it because, one, they may not make that much money, and they're not going to want to turn around and pay this person $5,000 or $10,000 in order to be in an exclusive mastermind. With me, I'm not making money off of this. Eventually, I hope to write some books. Maybe some people will buy it. Maybe they won't. Doesn't really matter to me. I'm here just to help and to get through some of these issues in my own life as well. So I'm here for you. You can contact me. I'm going to give you my email address right off here, so you're not even going to have to pay for it. Just write me for free. Anyway, enough of that rant, Brandon. Let's get on with the end of the show. So we'll pick this up next week as we deal with the next chapter in the book, The Uncommit, Winning Big by Cutting Your Losses. We'll get into this, and we have a few more chapters in this book. There's about 20 chapters total in the book. So we'll spend probably through December before we finish up this book, and then we will get into some new things. So, as always, until next time, remember this. You can say no. You can say no in your life. You don't have to make excuses for it. You don't have to feel bad for it. You have the right to say no in your life. But remember, the whole purpose in saying no is to open up areas that you really want to say yes to. You really want to be a yes person, but a yes person to the essential things and a no person to all the trivial, non-essential things. You can do it, and you can do it gracefully, and you can maintain a balance in your life of being a great, wonderful person who never enters in anywhere to a self-centered life just because you're saying no to things in your life. In fact, people will respect you even more. So until next time, embrace today with passion and intention. And don't die with your music still inside you. See you next time.